Hello, it's Katie again, and today we're going to be making some wire weaving samples. Now this is how I built up my repertoire of different weaves. So I'm starting with the very basics, and then we will work up and do different ones in different tutorials. But I'm starting with a 2-in-2 weave and a up and down weave, which can also be called a zigzag weave or an upstairs downstairs weave, whatever you prefer to call it. And what I do when I do my workshops, my wire weaving workshops for beginners, this is what we do for a good few hours and just make lots and lots of different samples and building up the neatness that you can get your wire work even on the very first day of trying some wire work. If you take your time, slow down, don't try to overface yourself with making a big project or even a small project. Let's just stick to just making this very tiny sample and then another one and then another one, and then that way you'll build up the way that you wrap and the ability to keep it very neat and tidy when you do come to start making your piece of jewellery. Okay, so what we're going to be using for this is some 1mm wire. So I'm using some gold 1mm wire and some 0.4 wire to wrap with. So these ones are wrapped with a gold, which is what I've got here, and I'm going to show you by wrapping with a different colour, so that I'm wrapped with some antique bronze on these ones here. And the weaves that we're going to do is the 2-in-2 wrap, like I just said, and this up and down type weave. So I'm just going to move these to one side and get myself some wires prepared. So we're going to be using the 1mm, so we're going to take our wire and smooth it out, and I tend to use this part of my hand because it's nice and warm is that part, and smooth it out like so. And we're just going to be taking about 10 centimetres at a time, not very much. We don't want to overface ourselves, like I said, by making long pieces, just nice samples, and these come in handy in the future if you want to remind yourself about a weave, so keep them in a place where you know you can find them again. You think, I want to do that weave, but I can't remember how I started, and just by picking up your sample piece, you will probably remember what you did to get started. So I've got my pieces there ready, so just 3 to start with, and I'm just going to grab some of my 0.4. We're only making small pieces, so about 40 centimetres or so. So cutting that with some flush cutters. And we're going to begin our weave. So just picking up one of our base wires to start with. We're going to start about 1 inch from the end, and I've popped my weaving wire underneath. And we're going to start wrapping with a couple of wraps just to form an anchor. So we always start with at least 2 wraps on one wire to begin with. Just see if I can come a bit closer there. So 2 wraps on one wire just to begin with, nice and close, nice and neat, close to your base wire, so we've got a good base to start on. So now both of my tail and my working wire are coming from the underneath. So I'm going to pop my next wire on top of my working wire, level them up so we know we're nice and neat and tidy. And then I'm going to bring this wire over the top, around the back, up and over the front and to the back again. Now I can see that I've got 2 wraps. So if I bring that up to the camera, it should focus in a second. There we go. I can see I've got 2 wraps on there. So that's the point where you know you're going to come in between those 2 you just wrapped. So bringing your wire up and in between those 2 you just wrapped, and then you're in the position where you can add your next wire. So we can add our next wire like so. So we've got 3. So I've added it underneath my weaving wire again. I'm going to take this, I'm going to pull it through to the back. This time I want to miss that first wire. So coming up and wrapping over the bottom 2 wires like so, and pushing up every time so I can see I've got 2 wraps on that row as well. So then we're going to come back up and in between the 2 we just wrapped. So in between those 2 we just wrapped. Now we're in a position to wrap those top 2 again. So we're going to come up and over the exact same movements that we just did, around just the top 2, so we're going to come in between these 2 here, over the front, around the back, and in between the 2 we just wrapped. So as soon as you see you've got them 2 wraps on the front, that's the point where when you're at the back, you're going to come up in between. So you can either push your wire up through like I just did there, or you can find the ends and come through at the right point. So we're coming in between the two we just wrapped there. And if you notice there, I'm actually pulling back here. I'm using the tension on the wire here and just pushing with my fingernail there to get that tension. Try not to pull like this because you'll end up pulling your wires, and if it's not a strong wire, if it's maybe a 0.8 that's a little bit more malleable, you'll pull your wires out of shape. So we're coming back over those top two and in between there and back in between the two we just wrapped. The bottom two, pushing, making sure before you complete anything, everything is pushed up together. Try not to work along and then think, oh, I'll just push everything back, because it won't be a very neat look. So I'm just going to bring that up to the camera and let that focus for a second. There we go. So you can see we've got 2 wraps on the top 2 wires, 2 wraps on the bottom 2 wires, and so on and so forth. And you'll continue doing that until you get to this phase. So like so. So you've got 2 and 2, 2 and 2. And then what you're going to do is you're going to finish on either the top or the bottom wire. It depends on the way that you want your piece to be finished. And you're going to finish by wrapping a single wire 2 times. So just wrapping once and twice. Okay, so then you're going to then you would continue on there, or move on to another piece, but always start on 2 wraps and finish on 2 wraps. Okay, so we're going to move on to the up and down design. So I'm just going to pull those wires off there for a second and snip that little bit of weaving off. We'll continue to use that piece of wire. So I'm going to add another 2 pieces of wire. So now I've got 5 wires. So I'm just going to level those up and snip these off so they're around about the same length, like so. So now I've got 5 wires to work with. Now sometimes when you get more than the 3 wires, it does become a little bit more difficult to handle, maybe if you're not used to it, or if you've got any dexterity issues with your hands. And what you can do with that is add maybe a little piece of tape, so some washi tape or something like that, just to hold your wires together as you start weaving. Or sometimes I use a ring clamp, that's what it's called. So a ring clamp. So with this, it is used by jewellers to set rings. So you'd pop your ring generally in there and then clamp it shut. But you can pop your wires in there and clamp that shut. Once you've got your wires in place, you just pop this piece in the end and give it a good push, and it would hold your wires, and that actually gives you something to hold. So on this piece, I'll add a little bit of tape, because mostly people will have that around the house. So I'm just going to tear a bit of tape off. So do that before you start wrapping, just so that you know you've got it there, because once you've got all your wires in place, you don't really want to be letting go until to take a bit of tape off. So we're going to start once again, very similar to the way we started at the beginning. So this is the wrap that we're making this time. So if I just, there we go. So we're going up and down, up and down. So it's going to start off very, very similar to the way we started off. So popping your wire underneath and wrapping around twice, getting those 2 good anchor wraps on. Popping our next wire underneath the same. I'm coming over the top, around the back, over the top and through it in between. Again, making sure we're pushing everything up together and being quite controlled in the way we wrap. Don't be tempted to just kind of wrap and then push it up. Just be quite controlled. So I'm coming down the front, up the back, but I'm using that bit of tension in my hand and pushing up, and then down the front, and then in between those last 2, those bottom 2. Okay, so at that point is the point where we change directions on the first one. So this time we're going to add another wire. I'm going to bring this up. So sometimes you might need to separate it out a little bit just to see where you're going. So pushing that up, making sure we're nice and tight together. 2 wraps on the front. Once you see those 2 wraps, you can come up in between like so. And then adding your last wire, leveling those up and wrapping those bottom 2 wires together. And again, we're just going to come back up in between the 2 we just wrapped. So if you remember that little mantra, just wrap over twice and come up in between the 2 you've just wrapped. You'll know exactly where you're going. And then now we're just going to change direction and come upwards. So up over those 2. So it's these 2 that we're wrapping this time. Over those 2. Push down and using the tension back here in my hand and just pushing up with my fingernail. Pushing and in between those 2 we just wrapped. Over the top. Wrapping those 2 that are penultimate to the top. Pushing up and back to in between the 2 we just wrapped. Now just another tip, I don't know whether I've already mentioned it, but if you're actually more placing your wire over it, so I've come across and over the top and then I'm placing my wire exactly where I need it to be. It's not a case of wrapping like that and then pushing everything together. It's actually being quite controlled over your where your wire is going. So I've come over the top and I'm placing my wire exactly where I'm going to be. So as you can see there, before I came through, I've actually already pulled that down. So I've told it where it's going to go, and then I'm going to come back through and up and in between those 2 I just wrapped. So we've got a lovely little first V section there. Just let that focus a second. There we go. So we've got our V section in there and we're ready to start working our way back down again. Okay, so that is going to give you this up and down, this V, gorgeous V sections. So they can be used in lots and lots of different designs. And then we've also got the one that we just learned previously, our 2 and 2 design, like so. So this one in particular, this up and down weave, that's a really great one to practice. I have got a demonstration coming up soon, a tutorial coming up soon for this. This is a weave with some seed beads, different gauges of wire also, that actually it's using this design, so we're going up and down. Sorry about that, the camera just blurred. So yeah, so this design is kind of using this one that we've just learnt today. I'll also show you how to finish it off too. So that's coming up very soon. I've already got that all prepped, so hopefully that should be in the next few days. So please don't forget to give my YouTube tutorial a like if you've enjoyed it. Leave a comment please. And also subscribe, because if you don't subscribe you might miss out on something. I've got lots and lots planned. I added a couple of videos yesterday, this one's for today, and then I'm going to be adding this bracelet. There's also another bracelet coming up, if I can see it, there it is. This is going to be a little bit more advanced. It's going to be some channel setting, but it's probably not your general kind of wire channel setting. It's actually using 2 wires so that we get a really nice channel set, and we get no back wire on the back, so there's nothing to distort the beads in the middle there. So that's a really nice one. And there's also some pendant ones coming up, some earrings coming up. Yeah, so please do subscribe if you've enjoyed it today, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.